Let's go.
Awesome. Hello, guys. Welcome to probably now the fourth, I don't know, the third or fourth episode of the podcast. Today, I'm joined by a very, very special guest, one of my great friends on X, Will Carter. Welcome, Will.
Thank you very much, Gus. Hi, everyone. My name is Will Carter. I am a podcaster and the founder of the Hero Academy, and I'm here today to have a very exciting conversation.
Definitely, man. And the one thing I love most about Will, and I think I said this when we first met as well, is your voice, man. You're definitely like the perfect guest to invite on a podcast.
Well, people keep telling me that I should be on podcasts and start my own, so eventually I have to listen.
Yeah, I mean, then it's going to be a very clear sign that something you're good at, which is a good
Mm,
thing. Um, but yeah, I guess today, Will, the conversation I wanted to have with you, this which we obviously did talk about before, because it's not like scripted. Hey, this is a
mm.
random topic, and we did discuss this before. Is going to be about the nature of reality. Probably a lot of esoteric, weird stuff which we're going to be talking about, just because it's not very, very well known. People don't really discuss it very seriously from what I've seen. People just kind of accept things as they are without really questioning it. So my goal today is for you as the listener to really start to inspire you to think a little bit more about what this reality actually is, and just to have some fun in it as well, because these things are really just questions which have no clear answers, but we can really just kind of use philosophy for in order to answer them. So with that said, Will, um, maybe it's interesting if we start with what is the nature of reality to you, or like um, what inspired you to start questioning the nature of reality?
Wow, that's a good question. So for me, it was finding the I went through this into actually through a scientific background. So it was I came to this via study of neuroscience, actually. So it was through the science of belief and behavior formation. And I found that we actually perceive the world differently to the way the world actually is. So the way our brains are structured is that we don't see what's actually there. We perceive through our limited sensory capacity about 1% of the entire light spectrum. So there are 99 other percent of light spectrums, things like, your infrareds, and there's a whole degree that we don't see. So we're actually only seeing part of what's there. And that got me thinking. So how does the brain actually work? And the other great thing is we see things upside down. When it goes through our eyes, the light is actually transmitted upside down through our eyeballs, and it's reconstructed by the brain. So we're not actually seeing what's there. We're seeing the way our brain puts things together. And wonderful thing about this is our brain will perceptually modify or discard information that is not in alignment with our core beliefs. Is why the the belief structure that we have and that's formed between 0 and 7 is so important and integral. And this is why I got into it, because I wanted to know how limiting beliefs worked. And the fact that your mind is able to perceive things differently depending on your beliefs blew my mind wide open. And I'm sure you've heard that, two people can see the same thing happen and interpret it completely different ways, and they can actually remember seeing different things. And this is the reason why, is because you're not seeing what's actually there. You're seeing what your brain allows you to see. I'm not sure if you've heard the old story about the first Cherokee Indians when they saw a three-mast boat. So the legend goes, when the Indians in Native America, or the Native American Indians, first saw a boat, like a massive, like a man of war from the Spanish Armada, they could not actually understand what they were seeing. So the legend goes that they just didn't see it. And I'm not sure if there's any truth to that, but that is something that I heard years and years ago. And this then led me on to so many other studies in terms of the physics of reality, and this led me down the rabbit hole of questioning everything, really. And I looked into Einstein's study, and I looked into Max Planck, his partner, and they inspired others. And the root discovery was that physical matter, is not real. It is made up of particles which we can observe and subatomic particles which we can't observe, vibrating in a very high speed of vibration, causing them to take up the space that creates a physical solid object. But the density of an object is 99% empty space. And then when they actually crack open the subatomic particles and look at the quartz on the inside, it's the same thing again on an energetic level. So matter doesn't really exist. So if we're perceiving a world that isn't real, filled with things that don't actually exist, it does make you question the nature of reality a little bit. And that's kind of where I came in.
Wow, that was such a great answer. Wow, I'm honestly a bit shocked by the level of depth and explanation you were able to give. I also think that you probably have studied this topic a lot more than me, so I will just give like a sort of heads up for that.
Sure.
Um, and I think it kind of the basic principle which I've always taken away from it is that everything is energy. So like you said, even on a physics level, they are basically, I don't know if they were able to hard prove it, but yeah, I don't know if there's anything which you're able to hard prove for that matter, but that pretty much everything is consistent out of energy. And why I think this conversation is so important, because some people might think it's a bit of a woo-woo conversation, like, is this like an illusion? Nothing is actually real. It sounds a bit like you guys are on some weird psychedelics, but I think the reason that this is so important to understand is because if this is a valid model to actually understand reality, then in my opinion, you should definitely be looking to understand how you can also use it. Because usually what tends to happen is if you understand things, you can actually use them properly. So let's say with this energy thing, what I realized in my life lately is that it's much more effective to do anything when you're in a better state, when you are in a better mood, than when you are in a sort of negative energetic state. Not because of specifically how you're feeling, but more so because the energy you carry with you has an influence on other people, on the activities you do. And I think that's a really important thing as well. And maybe to go back a little bit to what you said about the beliefs, because I also think that especially limiting beliefs are probably one of the main things which hold people back from success, especially in the beginning. They have done for me as well. And I think you are probably a really good person to ask a question about here. What are some of the limiting beliefs that you see most in beginners?
Well, that is a great question because I am in many ways a beginner myself. Um, but I think before I answer that, it's very important to understand that limiting beliefs or beliefs in general are created naturally as a way of interpreting the world around us. So when we are born, I think the stats are that we have 25 billion neurons, synaptic connections between our neurons when we're born. And this covers things like, being able to move, being able to breathe, being able to cry for attention. We come sort of hardwired with those ones. And then from the day we're born until around the age of 7, we're in a state of low beta, high theta brainwave frequency, which is basically a sponge phase. We're absorbing everything around us. And the neurons they are exponentially connecting with each other, interconnecting. So by the time we're 7, we have about 4 quadrillion, which is 1,000 trillion synaptic connections and neurons. So that's where the beliefs come in. And every time we see something out in the world, we make that connection. So if we find something for the first time and we have a negative experience, our mind records that. And the next time we come at that experience, we will then replay that. This is faster than thought, but we'll have that impulse from our mind. The synaptic connection will fire and we will have that feeling. And this is where fears come from. And I love the way that there's a guy called David Bayer who gives the example of the first time you meet a dog. You can have a positive or negative experience, and then later in life, when you meet a dog, you'll initially freeze up and have that feeling, that tightness. That's coming from the synaptic connection in your mind. And you mentioned earlier on that people view this as sort of a woo-woo kind of topic because it is so poorly understood. But there's science behind every single bit of it. And what you said about putting your influencing other people, this can all be seen on a energetic level because there's no difference between my body, the air in between my body and my hand. It's all made of energy and the same subatomic particles of protons, electrons, and neurons and quarks. So there's no difference. It's just a arrangement. So the limiting beliefs that I see a lot of new people to this topic bringing with them are things like, I'm not good enough. That's the big one, right? I'm not good enough to do this. And there are two different ways that I like to approach this. The one is try and find out what the thing you want is. So let's say you have a goal, and then I ask the question then, why don't you have it now? Or why can't you get it now? And then what comes up is the limiting belief. So that's what we need to change. It's a very simple process. That's how I try to identify my own limiting beliefs and help others. So I'm not good enough is a huge one. And then the other one is I'll never be able to figure it out. It's too big for me. You know, you see this a lot with older people who come to new technologies. You know, oh, that's for the kids. Oh, I'll never work that out. I'll get my children to help me. And they can, through neuroplasticity, go back and unlearn this. You know, they can bring themselves into the state where I can learn anything, I can achieve anything, I am always able to improve. But they don't, because they're fixed in their mindset. And there's a great model called the psychocybernetic loop, which was pioneered by Maxwell Maltz, which says that the belief starts to influence the thinking, and the thinking influences the feeling influences the action gets the result, and the result reinforces the belief, right? So it's a loop. And you break this at the belief level at the top. So that's how you can change it. But yeah, I'm not good enough. I'll never be able to be good enough. Look at my past. It's brought me these results. Therefore, I'm doomed to repeat. And if people aren't aware of this loop and how to break it, then they will continue to express the beliefs, which then will influence the thoughts, feelings, actions, results, and reinforce the belief. That's what I see a lot of.
I think that's also a really powerful answer, because these loops are especially really detrimental. So they can be really damaging, or they can be really positive. They can be very, you could say you can use them to get successful results, especially on social media, because the probably next question I'm going to ask you about this has to do with the like imposter syndrome, because I guess like feeling not good enough in some sense is also related to imposter syndrome. So why do you think that so many, especially people who start out with something, beginners, and sometimes I still have this myself, to be completely transparent, have this feeling that they're not good enough, even though the people that are really successful are literally the exact same? They probably have the same amount, if not more flaws, or you could say things they have to work on. Why do you think that why so many people have that problem?
Well, I think that a lot of this has got to do with people not understanding the mechanisms that our mind comes equipped with. So we have something known as, or what Bob Proctor used to call, the terror barrier. And this is simply a mechanism in our mind that is designed to keep us in the comfortable and the predictable. Now, the brain, the stem of the brain, I forget the technical name for it, has the reptilian side of our brain, right? The part that is hardwired for survival at all costs. And this part of our brain loves predictability. It loves to know where the food is, where the shelter is, where to go for clean water, and where to avoid where all the danger is. If it knows that, it's happy. It's the difference between the parasympathetic nervous system, so being at rest, being relaxed, and the sort of the fight or flight side of our brain. So we've got the relaxed side and the fight or flight brain. This part loves to be in the relaxed part, where it knows where everything is. Now, when we go to achieve something new, to put ourselves out there and to become greater than we are, consciously, with the higher part of our brain, sort of the frontal cortex and the higher faculties, we can envision ourselves doing something new. So we can see ourselves starting a new venture. But when we actually get physically into motion, we then are confronted by this part of our brain, which is doing its job. It's there to keep us safe, which is going to be bringing up thoughts and feelings to try and keep us in the known and the comfortable. So we might experience things like, this is new, this is dangerous. It'll bring up thoughts based on our past beliefs, like what if people judge me, which is a huge one. It'll bring up things like what if this all goes wrong, and this is often occurring under the conscious level, right? So we're thinking these thoughts and we're experiencing these feelings, but often we only get the feeling, we don't notice the thoughts. So the thought feeling action loop, we get stuck in the feeling and we don't take the action, or we take the action and it feels wrong because we're not in alignment. So the simple way of saying this is our brain does not understand that what we want, what we desire, is on the other side of this fear, this discomfort. So that imposter syndrome of like, I'm not good enough, comes from a deep-seated fear of change in the unknown, which is from the brainstem, the lizard brain, and also the reinforced behavior of, I tried this in the past and it didn't work out, it's going to go wrong again. And that's all coming from our learned behavior. So it's a very potent mix that keeps people stuck because they don't understand how to break it. But the great news is, when you do understand this, when you understand that this is simply a mechanism that's there to keep you safe, it takes the power out of it and you can act in spite of it. You can say to yourself, I'm feeling nervous. My body is feeling tight in the chest. And I understand that this is just my brain trying to keep me safe. I'm going to proceed anyway because I can see the result in my mind. And I know that if I can see it, I have the ability to achieve it.
That's brilliant. Like, I think one principle which comes into play here, which is pretty much going to be the key to any transformation. Like, personally, I've seen in my life the biggest transformation have always come from when I shifted my awareness, or like when I raised my awareness. Because what you're explaining right now is like kind of that you're becoming aware of the feelings and thoughts, if I'm correct on that. So how would you say, because obviously the entire conversation we're having about sort of nature of reality and everything is energy, how your brain perceives things. I guess the first step to really start to use that is to become aware of the illusion which life really is. So would you say that maybe the reason that a lot of people are struggling is because of their awareness? So for example, they're feeling not good enough, but is the reason for that because they have a limiting belief, or is the reason for that because they're not aware they have the limiting belief?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's both. And I think that the highest thing we can aim to achieve is understanding and a greater level of awareness. That's the only thing we lack, really. We have all the information inside of us that we need. And through our ability to interact with other people, we have access to everything. This is why I believe very strongly that everyone should take a step back from trying to acquire things externally until they feel comfortable to have them internally, because you can shuffle and rearrange things on the outside, but until you get that awareness of what it's actually like to be that person, you'll lose it because it's not who you are. And we always express our self-image. And this is why people can struggle for years and years and years, really fight to get somewhere where they could have got very simply by just changing their awareness and seeing, oh, I could have got there this way. I trekked up the mountain when I could have gone around it. And I think this comes back. There's a brilliant balancing act, I believe, that the greatest teachers have found between science and spirituality, where the awareness we're looking for is the mix between setting a goal, setting a burning desire, as Napoleon Hill says, having the faith that we'll achieve it, that self-confidence and that knowing, and instilling that into our minds so that we act towards it. And then the other side of the equation is non-resistance, a state of flow, which I absolutely love and is talked about a lot these days from like the actual actions that you take. But the inner state of flow, I believe, is more of an alignment between the four main parts of your mind. And when you're aligned towards a goal, so you don't have the limiting beliefs, you've either worked to remove them or you've installed new ones over them, which you can do, then it's all about doing less, not more, if that makes sense. Now, the way that I see this is when we're aligned, we take the actions needed to get the results. But we don't necessarily work any harder than other people. Those other people are just working uphill where we're going downhill. So we flow smoothly towards our goal and we work with non-resistance. whereas other people are working with those limiting beliefs because they don't have that awareness, right? They don't see that there's an easier path, and they don't see it because their mind won't let them see it, because it's not in line with their beliefs. It's not congruent, like we were talking about earlier. They physically won't hear the words being said. They won't see the opportunities because they're going back to that loop for a moment. If you believe deep down that you're not worthy of wealth, then you're not going to have the thoughts on how to make wealth. You're not going to have the thoughts on how easy it could be. You're always going to remember how hard it was growing up, how hard it's going to be in the future. So the awareness we're looking for is that ability to actually override and direct our limiting beliefs into supporting beliefs. And then with that awareness, aim towards a goal that we want, and we'll move there with less resistance. So I think that answers the question, and it's a very interesting topic that I'm absolutely in love with.
Yeah, I honestly agree. It's like, really abstractly speaking, the only thing you would need to change to achieve your goal is your beliefs. Because if you really
Absolutely.
believed you had already achieved your goal, in some way, the reality or the universe or whatever, infinite intelligence, whatever you like to call it, is going to make it happen. Because
Mm,
it always happens. Like, depending on how, I don't want to say on how aware you are, but let's say if you're really at the beginning of your journey. So when I started, for example, I was not aware of a lot of things.
mm,
And the first time I started writing down my thoughts and beliefs, because at the time I took a course for agencies, and there was this mindset module which I was completely blown away by, because it taught about like worldviews, perspectives, beliefs,
mm,
thoughts. And it was so crazy because the first time I wrote down my thoughts, I realized that they were exactly what I was seeing in my reality.
mm,
And I guess it's almost like a year later now, a year and a half, and I'm in the same house because I went traveling for a while, but then I went back. And the thoughts I have been having now are so different from what I had when I first started. In fact, I don't even think maybe I do get some similar thoughts just because of the environment. That's maybe another
mm.
thing to talk about. Like, what do you think what do you think the role of the environment is in this conversation? Like, how important is it for people to look at their environment, make sure it's in alignment with their
Mm.
goals, and how that's maybe a better question. How big do you think the influence of your environment is on your ability to achieve your goals?
Great question. So the environment is huge. Now, the important thing to mention here is it can be, you can brute force your way through an environment. So if you're in a negative environment where nobody's supporting you, where the beliefs are against you, if you have a high enough level of awareness and presence of mind to be conscious of what's coming to you, you are able to overcome it, but you are playing the game on hard mode. Because if your environment is supportive, you will find a much easier way of getting there. And a great example of this is people who go to prestigious universities. They don't necessarily get a greater degree of education, but they get a greater degree of support from the people around them. They get a greater level of consciousness from the people around them. You could say, if you go to one of the great universities, we've got Oxford in the UK here, we've got Harvard in America, what you're really getting is the consciousness of the people around you, people who are used to being wealthy, and therefore it becomes normal. And what is normal within is expressed without. So what you believe to be normal, what is your baseline, is what you can expect to experience. If it's normal for you to get up and work a 9 to 5 because everyone you've ever encountered does this, you will struggle trying to do something else because that's the normal. You are doing something away from the normal. And again, coming back to the mind, it loves the predictable, it loves the normal. So it will always outpicture the normal. So you can do this in a difficult position. Now, I grew up here in the UK and in Spain. And my family was, we'll say, middle class. They weren't rich, they weren't poor. My dad had a business. He was in the army for a long time. My mum was a stay-at-home mum. So for me, I saw my parents doing pretty well, but I saw the majority of other people. They went to work, they had a 9 to 5. So when it was time for me to leave school and get a job, that's what I did. I went straight into sales, and for 17 years, I was very good at sales, but I was very unfulfilled because I felt like I'm doing this, I'm doing what's expected of me, and if I keep going 40 years will pass in the blink of an eye and I'll be old and unfulfilled. So going a little off topic there, but I think it's really important that people take a look at the influences around them. And one of the best quotes you can remember about this is you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with, which is kind of universally accepted as true, but almost nobody listens to it. And one of the best things I love about this is it doesn't need to be physical. You know, I have spent more time with Bob Proctor, Myron Golden. I've got my little inner circle of people that I study with, and they don't even know who I am because I study them online through courses, and I allow their messages to sort of get into my mind as often as I can. So what I would say is if you're in a position whereby you're going against the normal, if everyone around you is working a 9 to 5, if everyone around you is dumb, sick, broke, and they're complaining about everything, you can still break out of that by changing who you associate your mind with and who you influence yourself with. It's just going to be harder.
That's brilliant. I actually wrote that last one down, what you said about surrounding yourself with 5 people, but it doesn't have to be physical necessarily.
Yeah. Well, I love the story that Bob Proctor used to tell. He read the book Think and Grow Rich every day for 62 years. You know, he never met Napoleon Hill. I know he never met Napoleon Hill, but he spent more time with him than anybody else, which was, it blew my mind because one of the great things about books and audiobooks these days is you are directly spending time with that person. They are writing that book, you are reading it, so they are talking to you. So it is a fantastic method. It's just like a YouTube video or even a podcast like this. And it's one of those things that a lot of people these days take for granted, that we just don't have the awareness. Coming back to that. And one extra point before we move on is the conscious mind. A lot of people identify themselves with the conscious mind, whereas this is the goal setting part of you, the part that decides what you want. It isn't the part that makes things happen. That's the subconscious. The goal of the conscious mind and the job of it is to act as the gatekeeper between the subconscious and the conscious. You can choose to accept or reject. And if you're in an environment where people around you are acting, let's just say, less than what you want to be, so they're acting a little bit, for example, less money conscious, a little bit less healthy, you can reject that with your conscious mind. You can say, that's not going to be me. I'm going to be this. Just understand that that's going to be a little bit more difficult than if you're surrounded with people who say, well, of course you're going to be rich. Why wouldn't you? It's abnormal for you not to be rich. Then you're going to be playing life on easy mode.
Yeah, I agree. Like at the start of my journey, I was still working like for my parents' house. I hadn't really done any networking then because the business model I did, I was in e-com and then I was in SMMA. They didn't really encourage networking with other entrepreneurs as much in the courses I took. But I went to this event. I don't know exactly when. I think it was like February or January 2022. And this was really the first time where I came in touch with or got in touch with entrepreneurs making like over 100,000 a month. And it was funny because like we were at this kind of mini mastermind. There were all of these seats in the room, and they were giving a presentation on the board. I guess there were about like 30 people there. And then I think about halfway through the presentation, they basically asked people of certain revenue ranges to stand up. So they said people between 0 and 10K a month, stand up. And then I stood up because I was making like 5K a month. Then eventually they got to 100K and over 100K. And there were like 2 or 3 people who stood up. And I remember being like, damn, bro. In the same room, these people, they probably see money in a way different, in a much different way than me, which was absolutely true. And that, to be honest, I was a bit too scared to actually go talk to them at the time. But I really think that what you're saying is true. Like the type of people that you surround yourself with, even if it's virtual, is probably the first and most important thing you should do. Just because otherwise you're going to be fighting against yourself and the world way too much. I think you did mention him before, but David Bayer has a very cool equation about this, which is desire plus non-resistance equals result. So basically, if you have a desire for something, the only thing you really have to do to achieve it is just not resist it. And you might think it's crazy, but I think it's a good point, because when I look back at the times I have had the most success, it's always when I have accepted what has been coming onto my path instead of being fearful, because fearful is a form of resistance. Anxiety is also partly a form of resistance. So yeah, let's actually see what might be an interesting topic to talk about next. I think maybe what is something that people can do practically today to start becoming more aware of these things that hold them back?
Yeah, brilliant idea. Well, what you can do is, first of all, take an inventory of where you are. Now, I think it's always really, I know a lot of people who try and motivate other people will say, you know, it doesn't matter where you start, it only matters where you finish. I think it's a really good idea to start with where you are, because if you can take an honest inventory of where you are, you could say, you know, take myself, for example, you know, I'm 36 years old. I live in the UK. I own my own home. This is where I'm starting. But if I looked at myself, you know, let's say 5 years ago, you know, 31, chronically overweight, hypertension, you know, pre-diabetes, really negative space in my mind. You know, I've always been the one pillar I've got is I've always been good at relationships. You know, I saw my parents getting on well. I got married. Actually got married a few years ago, but I've been with my wife for 17 years. You know, we got together when we were both just 18, 19. She was just finishing uni. So I took an inventory of where I was. And this is actually what I did 2 years ago when I decided, right, enough's enough. You know, I'm not going to be overweight anymore. I'm not going to be broke anymore. I'm going to take an inventory of my life and I'm going to get where I'm going to go. So what I did was I literally wrote out, this is where I want in the big 5 areas. You know, you've got your health, wealth, money, relationships, and spirituality is what I did. So take an honest inventory of where you are, because you can't really know where you're going if you don't know where you're starting. So first thing I would say, step number 1, write down exactly where you are and allow yourself to get upset with it. You know, this is really important. You might write down, you know, I've got $10 to my name, and that might crush you a little bit. Let it crush you, because that's motivation. That is showing you that's out of alignment with where you want to be. Because the brilliant thing is when you know what you don't want, you automatically know what you do want. You know you want the opposite. If you're feeling in your chest, for example, I'm broke and I hate it, then you know you want to be wealthy. You know you don't want this brokenness. So that's where I would start. Write down everything about where you are today. Understand this is just the expression of your beliefs. It's not good. It's not bad. It is just what you believe about yourself. And if you don't like that, the great news is you can change that. So once you've got down exactly where you are, what I would then do is go through each of the key items and start thinking about the belief structure that you have. And David Bayer, actually coming back to him, he's got a great list on his website of about 100 common limiting beliefs, which people can go and download. It's a very good resource, but you can still do this. You can think, right, what do I want? So if I know, for example, let's just say, as an example, my first car, right, which was a beaten up blue Toyota Corolla. I called it Chevy, and it was a mess. It had a leak in the fuel sump so that when you put fuel in, it would just come out the bottom. Complete mess, right? I knew when I was driving that car, I hate this car. I want a good car. So you would think then, what do I want? At the time, I wanted a 2008 Honda Civic. To me, that was peak car. Then you ask yourself, why don't I have that now? Why can't I just go out and get that right now, this moment? The answer is a limiting belief. I don't have the money. Okay, that's the most common one. It's too big for me. What if I scratch it? What if this happens? What if it gets stolen? Limiting beliefs. Write them out. Because the truth is, you don't need the money. You can either leverage the money by getting somebody else to buy it for you. You could get it on finance if you're able to do so. And even if you think you can't, that's another limiting belief. Write that down. And what you want to then do is go in and look at these limiting beliefs and work with either a coach or somebody, or even learn how to do it yourself. It's an amazing skill to learn, is how to ask yourself the right questions to get these limiting beliefs. Effectively, you need to break them down, realize that these are just things that were formed through your formative years. These are literally just neurons in your mind that are firing together. And what we want to do is break that habit and start firing in a positive way. Because the brilliant thing is you can only think of one thing at a time, positive or negative. Okay, you can't do both. You can't be happy and sad. You can't be upset and relaxed. So you want to basically direct your thoughts to how you can and rebuild those habits. So once you know where you are, you know what you want, you've removed the limiting beliefs, your behavior, the next part of that loop, is going to automatically express your new belief, which will get you the result, which will get you then reinforcing the loop the correct way. And then you'll find yourself over a period of time going through the motions to get what you want. That is how a belief fundamentally is changed. So if you're brand new, I would take that 3-step process, figure out where you are, figure out what you want, break down anything in the way, and you'll automatically find yourself moving closer to your goal.
That is so much, there's so much value in what you just said. Like for anyone who's still here and who listened to the past 5 to 10 minutes, that's definitely a big jump. And one thing which I take away from what you said, which I think is quite interesting, because I think you have explained brilliantly for people how to practically start identifying these beliefs and overcoming them. So that's really helpful. I don't have anything to add. But what I would like to talk about next is specifically the money thing. Because the first thing which also came into my mind when you said what's holding you back was money. Because I also see this pattern of people who see money as the vehicle towards their goal. The problem is, because we see the money as the vehicle to our goal, instead of focusing on the goal, we start focusing on the money. And in my opinion, money is also kind of a bit of a spiritual thing and has a certain energy to it. If you don't believe me, like wealth is a feeling. Literally, I can't believe that if you have, for example, gotten like a large amount of money, that you haven't felt different than if you hadn't got that. So I think really that money in itself has energetic components like anything. So what would you say is really like maybe good advice for people who are so focused on money? Because I see it all the time. People, I want to monetize my personal brand. I want to monetize my coaching business. What advice do you have for people who are so focused on money in the beginning?
Okay. Well, the very first thing to understand is that money's good. Okay. A lot of people have a tug of war in their minds. So, on one hand, we've been programmed that money is the goal, right? Chase the money and you'll be able to live whatever you want. Whereas at the same time, we're also getting programmed that money is bad, that rich people are bad. And like you can see this in movies. I always go back to Titanic, the movie, because you can watch that and you can be, rooting for the heroes, right? Jack and Rose, rooting for the poor people against the rich people. You don't realize it at the time, but that is going into your mind. Rich people equal bad. I don't want to be rich. Sorry, I don't want to be bad. Therefore, I don't want to be rich, but I want money, but I don't want to be rich. Frustration. That's where a lot of people get hung up. That's why a lot of people spin in circles for years and decades. And eventually, I think it was Earl Nightingale that said, out of every 100 people, only one person gets rich. 95% people end up broke and 4 people are comfortable. Those are the stats, right? So 95 out of every 100 people spin in this cycle until the end of their days. So that's the first thing, is to break the belief that money is bad. Money is a vehicle. It is a tool. It allows you to do more of what you're already doing. So when we're looking at, I want to monetize, I want to get my personal brand, what the goal there is I want the freedom to be able to do the thing that I really want to do. And I made a video about this recently, is you might think you want the money, but why? So you want the money in order to do something. You don't just want a big stack of cash. You can't eat it. You can't really sleep on it. It's not that comfortable. So you don't want the physical money. You don't want the numbers on the screen. They don't do anything for you. You want the money because that allows you to trade it for other things. So what are those other things? Work that out. For me, the next step was time and money freedom. So I want the money so I can have time and money freedom. Fantastic. That's a little bit more clear. That's a bit more specific. I want to be free from the things I don't want to do. I want to go away from pain. I want to go towards pleasure. That's the human condition. But that's still not the answer. Time and money freedom to do what? You can be wealthy. You can be free of time constraints. But what do? You don't just stand there all day. You've got a bunch of money. You've got a bunch of time. Now what? What happens next is the really important part. This is where we start to work on our goal and our dream. And this is where all humans have their own individuality. So we're trapped almost in this race, right? Where everyone's chasing the same goal, the money, because they want the perceived time freedom to do something. And this is where we're unique, right? This is where we start to break down the uniqueness. So I think people approach this the wrong way around, because they all go on the same path of getting the money, but they don't work out what they really want, what makes them unique. Because when you align with your purpose, I believe you are led to the circumstances and events and the right path that'll get you the money, because the money's a tool to allow you to do your dream. So for me, as an example, I, for the longest time, just chased the pound, chased the dollar. And I was in sales. And for 17 years, I was constantly trying to increase my earnings. And I capped out and I was like, I can't break the ceiling. And eventually I was working 12-hour days. I was doing my base 8 hours and I was doing overtime whenever they had it available just to get the money, but I didn't know why. It was such a frustrating loop. I would come home and I was like, I earn X amount per month. Like it was like 5,000 was my best month. I was like, yeah, 5,000. Now what? I'm burned out. I can't even sit down and enjoy. So what it took me doing was sitting down and really writing it out. So I wrote out the list of where I was, and it wasn't a pretty sight. I then started to break the beliefs, but I also worked out where I wanted to be. And for me, the idea of having complete time and money freedom meant I could then work on a goal. And over the years, I've structured my goal to be, I want to help people break free of their limiting beliefs. This is why I am here. And this is a goal that is completely determined by me. It's self-chosen, self-directed. I don't believe that our purpose is predefined and it's going to be out there. If only you turn over the right rock, you'll find it. I think that it's the sum total of all of your experiences, beliefs, and desires. So again, going back to knowing what you don't want, flipping it to what you do want. I believe the world has a problem where people have given their power away. People don't know that ability to achieve is within them. So my goal that I've given myself is to help people rediscover that and remove all of the programming in the way of getting towards that goal. You can do exactly the same thing. So work out what it is that you would do with the time freedom and the money freedom. So let's say your problems are solved. You want then to do something. You feel called to do something. Figure that out. And that is your contribution to the world. Once you know that, the time, the money, they become stepping stones on the way to it. And that in and of itself removes a lot of the resistance that you'll have to money as a goal, because you'll always have enough. If you have a strong enough why, you'll always figure out the how. You'll always figure out the how. You'll never say, I know my purpose, but I don't have 20 grand. You'll work it out. You'll bump into somebody. You'll have an idea. Coming back to that whole belief thought cycle, you'll have the idea. So you'll always have the resources if you have the goal in mind. So start with the goal and work backwards.
I think that's spot on. And there's one thing which I heard from David Bayer as well. Like, guys, if you want to take one person away to study, definitely study David Bayer.
Yeah, 100%.
But he basically said that, for example, Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, when you look at the beginning of their journeys, and I studied this because I had like a few hours 2 weeks ago, I think, or like maybe a lot more, where I went into ChatGPT and I started analyzing the start of like Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, like a bunch of successful people, just because I wanted to know, first of all, did they have desire for money? Second of all, did they have money given to them in order to start their businesses? Because obviously some businesses require investing, and I wanted to find out if I, for example, would need investing to grow like a successful company. That's a story for another day. But anyway, David Bayer said about Elon Musk that he basically had this big vision, obviously, of getting people to Mars, electric cars to help clear the environment up and the CO2. And because of that, because his vision was so big, there was just a way in which he was able to receive the money. Because Elon Musk, I think he said it on an interview once, if Tesla and SpaceX would go bankrupt, he would go bankrupt immediately as well. So you can really see with these types of people that the vision they have is so big, the vision they have requires a lot of resources. And as a result, the resources, you could say, kind of flow to them. Obviously, it happens in a much more logical way, but it's not a way which we can predict. That's like an important differentiation to make. What I do find interesting, though, is there are a lot of people in the mindset, you could say law of attraction mindset, who are interested in that. who do like money affirmations or do like money visualizations. Since we talked about money not being necessarily the goal, what do you think about that? What do you think about people who try and, for example, manifest money or imagine that they have wealth and stuff like that?
Sure. So I think that people lose sight of the actual purpose of an affirmation. Now, I learned affirmations years and years and years ago from Brian Tracy, who's one of the big business guys. He was, I love Brian Tracy stuff. He's very no nonsense sales guy. But he led me into Jim Rohn, and he led me into, Bob Proctor and the amazing teachers that I learned from. And the message, I think, has gotten mixed up. People think there's power in the words. People think the affirmation itself does something, but it doesn't. The affirmation is simply a statement of truth, perceived truth, that you use to program your mind to believe a certain thing. It's the belief that does the work through the model we've been talking about. And going back to one of my very favorite teachers, Neville Goddard. Neville was a spiritual teacher. He studied under an Ethiopian rabbi by the name of Abdullah, who also taught Joseph Murphy, who came up with the power of the subconscious mind. So these are two very different people, spirituality and science. They both studied under the same guy. And what Neville was interested in is the inner being, the one inside. Now, this is what he identified Jesus Christ with, because he believed that the Bible was not a history book. It was a book of lessons and allegories. And the Christ state was the imagination of man. And the imagination is what you use to change the core fundamental self-concept. Joseph Murphy took the opposite approach, and he studied the subconscious and auto-suggestion, which is where affirmations come from. And Napoleon Hill also talks about auto-suggestion. He's got a whole chapter of it in Think and Grow Rich. So people who sit there and think, I'm rich. No, you're not. You know you're not. You would not be saying that you were rich if you were rich. If you had the resources, you'd be thinking and feeling. Now, one thing that's really important, and I don't want to discourage anyone from affirmations because there is a benefit to them, is to understand that your mind thinks in pictures. Your mind does not understand the words that you're saying. It works in emotions and pictures. So if you are trying to use an affirmation by just robotically repeating it, and I see people on YouTube preach this, what you are doing is you are simply strengthening the neural connection that those words evoke within you. So if I say, for example, you've heard the example, don't think of a pink elephant, don't think of a red boat, it brings the image to your mind. You don't see the words, you see the image and the feeling that you associate, if any, with the image. So affirmations, I believe, have a place in directing the internal image-making facility, the imagination, the imagination that we have inside. From your calendar. Please ignore that. It's telling me I have to eat.
Not scripted.
Not scripted. But the imagination is really the part that facilitates the learning of the intended state. So as an example, let's just put this into practical terms. Let's say somebody does want to affirm for wealth. They say, I want to be wealthy. So they've identified their goal, what they want. And now they start to think to themselves, what would it be like if I was wealthy? And then that will bring up an image and a feeling. That is what you want to train your mind in, not in the words, but the image and the feeling. And this is the reason why the great books, the great teachers say, act as though it was so. In the Bible, it says, for those that believe they have, it will be given unto them. Believe you have received it and you will, in Mark 13, I think it is. Nobody fact check that, I'm probably wrong. But it does say that. And this is what I believe it means. Believe you have it and you will receive it. So what you are doing on a practical and scientific level, you are placing yourself in the end state. You are training the mind to assume that new state is normal. You are setting up the neural connections. And remember what we said about the subconscious. It doesn't know the difference between believed and real. And this is something that sports has shown us over the years. The same neurons fire when you imagine you're doing something intensely as when you do it physically. All you are doing when you affirm is you are training the mind to make it natural, to make it normal. Once it's normal, once it's part of your internal belief structure, your thoughts then produce the feelings, which produce the actions, which produce the result. There's nothing magic about affirmations. And I think that the law of attraction community has it wrong. They think if I say the words, something outside of me is going to go, yeah, I like those words. You can have this. You know, I'm the universe. You can have this. You're deserving of this. You said the right words to me. Whereas if you think about it logically, the power does not lie outside of you. It never has. The power is inside your mind. It is through your conscious and subconscious mind that you dictate your actions. Because if we think about this logically for just a moment, nobody has ever sat and meditated and had somebody knock on the door with a big bunch of cash to say, you meditate, you ordered this, sir? I have a big bunch of cash for you. But somebody might sit on the couch and train their mind, get inspired and think, I've just figured out the solution to a problem. I'm going to go solve that problem and sell it for a bunch of money. Same outcome. You affirm, you get the money, but the vehicle of getting you there is different. Because on a physical level, although we are all connected on an energetic and I believe a super conscious level, which is another discussion, but the conscious, subconscious, and superconscious is effectively that energy field that we're all part of, which I do believe is directed by an intelligence of some sort. I'm not going to try and put a name to it because I ain't that smart. But I do believe that we are all connected. So when I think something and I get an inspiration, everyone needed to play their part also gets the subconscious direction to play their part through that energetic field, which we're all connected by. But that's the key difference. Affirmations in and of themselves do nothing. They're just words. But affirmations felt repeatedly train the mind to express the thought, which causes the feeling, which causes the action, which causes the result. And that gets you where you want to be.
Wow, man. Like, honestly, you have so much good practical advice for people. I can also tell that you do this with a lot of passion, because what I tend to see on not just on X, but like typically in the online business space, is the people who usually chase the money, especially in the beginning, they tend to stay in it for the money because, like you said, that's kind of what they are familiar with. And I don't know if there's anyone who actually like is going to achieve solid long-term success if they just keep focused on the money.
Yeah.
Because eventually it's not going to drive you anymore. This is the problem I had myself with my agency, because I got to a point where I was able to like do the majority of things which I wanted, but now I had this business which I didn't enjoy. So it was honestly, to many people, it seemed crazy because I think I was making like 9K a month with the agency, and I went traveling and I pretty much could do what I wanted, but I wasn't really fulfilled. So really, I believe that you make a very good point in this. Really, if people just pursue what they actually want to do beyond the money and don't focus so much on that, it's going to be more beneficial for everyone, because like they're going to be more inspired to create valuable products, to help people with, for example, coaching. And just the world becomes a better place like that. And before we wrap this up, Will, because I think we're almost an hour in, what is the last final piece of advice you could give to someone who's starting out and wants to have massive success in, for example, business or any area of life, so for that matter?
So the best piece of advice that I would ever give to somebody, the piece of advice I wish someone had just sat me down at when I was 21 and said, forget chasing other people's dreams, focus on this, is the world outside of you is a reflection of your own internal belief systems. You're not seeing what's there, you're seeing what you believe to be there. The work that you need to do is not in the outside world. The actions that you take are automatically driven by your beliefs. So your only task to start with is to work on your mind, work on your beliefs. Now, that is not to say that you won't do the things on the outside. You'll still sit down, you'll still make connections, you'll still make calls, you'll still do the work, you'll still give the value, you'll still get paid. Okay, that will all happen on the outside, but you are in direct control of your mind. And the number one thing that I wish I knew when I was earlier, which I was younger, if someone had said to me when I was 21, Will, you're gonna spend the next 17 years chasing the dollar, and it's not going to get you anywhere because you're still working with broken beliefs, then I would have said, okay, The money's not important. Let me fix the beliefs, and that's going to allow me to live the life I'd really want to live. And you'll get fulfillment so much easier. So if you're just starting out on this, find somebody to work with or study it and work on it yourself. Work on fixing the beliefs that you have that hold you back, because you're not only going to get a much better life for yourself, you're going to contribute to a much better world and get that level of fulfillment that you think the money's going to bring you.
That is beautiful, man. I think everyone was ready with their pen and paper writing that one down. Anyway, well, before we wrap this up, because I think that first of all, your story as well is really inspiring. I've read a lot about it on X. You're doing great work on Skool now. Where will people be able to find you? Like, what are the major things you're currently doing? And if people do want some help from you, where can they find you as well?
No problem. So yeah, I'm on X as the Will Carter. Only recently started, but already making amazing connections on there. So please do feel free to reach out. I'm running spaces several times a week. We're running through the Success Book Club. If you're interested in the great classics of Love, Think and Grow Rich, I'm also running a goal setting workshop this coming weekend to help people with Q3 coming up. And if you are interested in joining a community of goal-minded people, the Hero Academy on Skool is a free academy I'm putting together to bring people who are focused on helping each other towards the goal. And if you want to work with me directly, you can reach out to me on Skool or on X. I offer accountability training as well as mindset coaching for those who really want to help break down the limiting beliefs and set you on the path to success.
That is amazing, man. I'll be sure to also put the links to your socials and Skool in the description if people want to check it out. I really want to thank you for today's conversation. Well, very interesting. And I'll be looking to see you, listener, in the next episode.